This is Eric Pepke for Dead Man Video. This is a follow-up to the video I released yesterday, the Real Comics Experience or something like that, about comic books and how they're made using prison slave labor right here in the good old US of A. That video, I intended it to be a lot longer and with a lot better continuity. I'm going to leave it as it is, but it was really hot yesterday, and I'm outside in the sun. All the nice benches are taken. I was, and my brain overheated, and I got more than a bit, how shall we put it, sleepy. And I've recovered now. It's the morning. It's still a little bit cool, and I'm going to ramble on about the things that I missed in that video. So let's go back to the comics. And they're here. I put them in a bag so that they didn't get wet, most of them. And of course I wrote the press about this, but not a single member of the mainstream press, and that includes Pacifica Radio and all the people you probably think are good in Democracy Now! And all that stuff. And it includes Jeff Beck, and it includes everybody of every size on all the political spectrum. They just do not care at all. The only newspapers, the only media at all that have even acknowledged receipt of something I sent them have been media that, as a policy measure, or as a policy whatever, have the pay attention to prisoners. Many of them will print articles and letters from prisoners. Some of them even have a section for prisoners, and those are free. Under Lock and Key, News and Letters, and Prison Legal News. And the former two, the first two, actually printed articles of mine, heavily redacted. And the last one, well, they gave me 6 months free subscription, so they're okay too. But you can find what I set out. There are 2 articles about prison slave labor on the American Prison Writing Archive, which you can Google very easily, and you can search for me, search for my name on it, and find those articles. I have a bunch of other articles which explain a lot of stuff. As far as I can tell, nobody has actually done this yet, so you'll be the first if you catch this video. And you'll probably be the first to catch this video too. But unfortunately, they're gnats who remind me of the press in terms of their attention span. So those 2 articles, both of them were printed in heavily redacted and reduced form by News and Letters. News and Letters has a circulation of something like 4,500. It's not well known. Probably the biggest claim to fame that you may have heard of is, you know, the female honorific Ms. Well, everybody stopped using that in the 1940s, and they continue to use it. And someone whose name I forgot, but you can look it up, noticed that and decided to bring it back. And so that's why you have 3 check boxes on your forms instead of 2 when you're dealing with women. And so they printed my articles, and they're on the website, newsandletters.org. You can look them up. I think I'm the only one who has ever made a comment. I would be absolutely flabbergasted if I saw a comment from anybody else, because people just don't care. So that is my experience with the press. But let's go back to this one. As I pointed out, this is actually a good criticism of a fascist society. Precisely the kind of society that would think nothing of enslaving prisoners to do work. And so it broke my heart. It really did. to see this, to see that this had been done with prison slave labor. And I couldn't imagine that anybody would do this deliberately. Anybody capable of making something like this would be aghast to find out that there's prison slave labor. Certainly they wouldn't use it. But of course what happens is there are subcontractors, and the Unicor plant gets these orders, and they had death marches of 12-hour shifts. Even for one of my friends, Josiah, who he wasn't the one that smuggled stuff out, but we talked a lot. And he's pushing 80, and they think nothing of doing this. So I imagined, yes, I'm a chump, I imagined that if I made contact with them, they would say, man, this is terrible. We're going to do something about this and watch our practices to make sure this never happens again. Nope. Now, I could not find a mail address in this, and of course I had you don't get web access in prison, and so I waited around for about a year because I couldn't do anything about it. And then a friend of mine was released from prison, and I asked him to make contact, and I sent him a letter of mine to scan. And he kind of stretched the limits of his supervised release. He got lucky and they didn't send him back to prison for it. And he accessed the web and sent them my letter. And he got a letter back. Now, he said Chris said, but of course this is a couple. Christopher and Christine Kezelos, or Kezelos, or however you pronounce it. So they're both Chris. And he wrote me that Chris had written him back and said, well, this is going to take some time to unpack. That was 2 years ago. When I got into the relative freedom of being in halfway house, I got on the computers at NC Works and I wrote them a letter with the whole story on it. And I never heard from them. So they don't care. They simply do not care. They're perfectly happy with having their stuff made by slaves so that they can not only sell it and make a lot of money, but also get to pretend that they're against that sort of stuff. They're liars, they're frauds, and they're fascists. I assert, yea, verily unto you. Christopher and Christine Kezelos of Zealous Creative are liars, fascists, and frauds. And if you buy this comic, so are you. So let's go to another thing, because all I talked about was comics. There was other stuff there. There were recall notices for an automobile manufacturer that you would recognize. There were some nice, very inexpensive, of course, because slave labor is for that, shiny tabletop adventure type game, Dungeons and Dragons type things. I'm not going to mention the names of the companies because I did not actually see one of these. The airbag recall was, for example, too big for anybody to smuggle out. But they did smuggle out. My friend, his pseudonym is Eric. Maybe that's ironic, but I spelled him with a K. Did smuggle out some of these. Now these, I presume, are advertising cards. Maybe they slipped them in magazines or something. And here's the back. I can put it up so that if you want to, you can see there is no identification that this was made in prison, which is illegal. Well, sort of. Maybe I'll do another video about that. Okay, and you've got the You have three models who look exactly alike, but who require different kinds of makeup, which is really kind of good reductionism. That would intelligent semiotics to make them all identical except for the skin tone. Now, my friend Eric was only able to smuggle out 8 of these cards for me. The security was just too tight. They were searching everybody on their way out. And I sent 6 of them to the kind of magazines that would advertise this kind of stuff. I remember I sent one to Cosmopolitan, one to Vogue, one to Mademoiselle, and one to Paper, and one to a couple of other women's magazines. But it doesn't really matter because none of them acknowledged that I'd received, that they had even received this from me. They don't care. And they probably don't care because you don't care. You'll just buy the stuff anyway. And so I kept 2. One of them is safe, and I'm not going to tell you where it is. The other one went through 3 groups of unreliable people before it was sent back to me, and so this is very precious. Now, the reason I set out most of them is I still believe that some of you don't want to get stuffed into ovens, and you pay attention to this. Of course, I was completely wrong about that. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to send them out before they were shipped as proof that I got them straight from the source. I thought that would be valuable, but of course it isn't at all because people just don't care. So after that, I saw a copy of O magazine, that's Oprah Winfrey's magazine, and I had run out of cards. I tried to get them off, because also another thing about being in prison is they can take all your stuff anytime they feel like that. You don't care about that either. And so I wrote them a letter. But this time, I wrote it and I saved up my stamps to do it certified mail. And I got a couple of other guys in prison to sign an affidavit saying this. And you can see it on the screen. So you can also look up the number of the certified mail and see that it was delivered. It says it was delivered to a P.O. box, but somebody assured me that sometimes even big buildings don't take mail there, and they have P.O. boxes where it gets sent if it arrives there. I never received a reply. And when you think about it, really, what does Oprah Winfrey care about slavery anyway? She's got hers, she's all right, everything's fine. So, that's all I have to say.